Hi, welcome back for another video. So now that my story is out there, my intention was originally to start getting into more practical aspects of animation, mainly tips and tricks that would usually be overlooked, things that people don't typically think about. But something came up and I decided to do one more, and then the next one should be more practical. So in this one, I kind of wanted to talk about persistence of vision. Persistence of vision is something all animators should be familiar with. Persistence of vision is a fundamental principle of biology or physiology, depending on how you want to look at it, that basically gives the illusion of movement, particularly when we talk about how things were done traditionally. So just to illustrate this, say I put up a dot on the screen and you stare at it. What happens is the longer you stare at it, the longer you see it. And especially if you don't move your head or anything, right? The image kind of burns into your retina. And this, you can compare this a little bit to back when flat screen TVs first came out. There was an issue that became apparent when people were watching, for example, say a news channel, and in the lower third you had the news station logo in the corner, right? And then when they turned off the TV, the logo was burned onto the screen, or if they changed channel, there would always be like a ghostly image there. And so our eyes work kind of the same way. The longer you look at something, the longer really it imprints on your retina, right? So if I take away the dot, I don't know if enough time has gone by, but you could maybe try your experiment if not. But there should be like the ghost of an image of a dot floating. And basically what they've discovered through testing is that 24 frames per second is a good frame rate to display images slow enough for the brain to register, but fast enough to give the illusion of motion when you're flipping between frames, right? I'll probably have another video on this where basically the idea is 1 frame you feel it, 2 frames you see it. When I say that, those who know, know. But I digress. The other way that the term persistence of vision can apply is really the meat of what I want to get into today. It could essentially be defined as tenacity in the face of great odds. What do I mean by that? Well, let's start by vision. You can have a vision. You can call it a dream or a goal. It's something you've defined that you want to work towards. And so any goal that you have, there will be obstacles, right? And the difficult thing is knowing whether going through those obstacles, whether the struggle will be worth it. And so the way it was explained to me is that a goal or a dream should be big enough to see past the obstacles. What happens is, if it isn't, is that the obstacles obstruct what you're trying to go for. And when you're in the thick of it, there comes a time where you might ask yourself why you're doing it. That's normal and it's okay. But what tends to get people through the hard times is having a goal that's important enough for them to endure the difficulties. So really what I wanted to do was a little something to give people out there some hope. Before we do, we kind of have to look at the landscape of the industry. The gist of it is that there are transitions, there are shifts going on in the industry. There's a lot of things going on at the same time. Like for instance, the broadcast model of making a TV show and airing it on television isn't working the way it used to. So now things are moving over to streaming, which has its own set of challenges, right? And I think they're still trying to figure some of that out. Then there's a number of mergers and acquisitions that have happened with animation companies and media companies and all that. Basically what that's created is an environment where there are fewer clients now doing fewer projects because there are fewer sources of funding to put towards as many productions as there used to be. And then you have the advent of generative AI, which is something we don't like to talk about, but the fact is, if a client can save money using a tool that's out there, they most likely will. And I think on the client side, there's some hesitancy moving forward because they're still experimenting with generative AI, trying to figure out how they can use it. AI could probably use its own video. All these topics really could. And something else that's going on, maybe not everywhere in the world, but here in Canada, my experience has been that as far as animation goes, we're very much in the service industry. And most of our clients are down south in the United States of America. And there is some political tension between the two countries right now. I don't know how much this plays into it. I know some time ago there was some talk of tariffs on productions happening outside the US. If and how that affects the animation industry, I don't know. But, depending on what's going on, there could be a lot of hesitancy. The bottom line with everything going on is there's just a lot of uncertainty as we figure things out, as we figure out how different factors affect production long term. So things are tough out there. It's not the ideal time, some would argue, to get into the animation industry. But the fact is, I don't know that there is an ideal time. There's always something going on, and people need to do what they have to pay the bills. There's no arguing that, but that doesn't mean that you have to give up on what you want. It might be more difficult at this time to pursue a career in animation, but it's not impossible. And there will come a time where things turn around. But right now, yeah, things are not ideal. I don't think the industry is coming to an end. Nothing's coming to a close per se, but there's a lot of hesitancy going on, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of pumping on the brakes maybe, or red lights until things are figured out. And then things get greenlit. So maybe after things line up, there'll be a green light and the industry can move on. Things will start coming up again and booming, hopefully, and hopefully make up some of this downtime that there's been. That being said, I did say I wanted to offer some hope. So there's a couple of stories I want to share. I can't remember exactly where I picked up the first one. I believe, like back in college, probably our graduating year, we had someone come in talk about his experience working in 3D and doing these things. And I think he talked about the importance of building relationships with people. And he gave an example. It wasn't him, but someone he knew. I think he was a compositor. He might have been a 3D artist like he was. And in my mind, he was a compositor. He was out of work and, trying to find his next contract. And there was this studio he kept going to, right? Applying and just checking in to see, are there any openings, that kind of thing. And just by going in regularly, he kind of had built up a bit of a relationship with the people there. So one day he was in talking with the boss of the company, right? And they were kind of chatting it up and someone came up and basically kind of interrupted the conversation. It was saying like, we got this issue, we can't figure it out. And so they're kind of going back and forth. And so the compositor was watching this happen, kind of listening, and he kind of interjected and he just asked, well, did you try doing this thing? And the other person kind of looked at him and said, well, what do you mean? And he said, do you mind if I have a look? And so they took him down to a desk where someone was working and he has a look at the scene. And so he kind of pokes around a little bit and then click, 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 and then the problem is solved. And so the boss kind of went over to another desk, took a compositor and kicked him out the door and said, it appears we have a vacancy. Would you be interested in working for us? I don't think the last part really happened, but after he had proven what he knew, he was hired on. Sometimes it can take some time for an opportunity to come up for people to see what you bring to the table, or even have a chance where they might be willing to roll the dice, right? I know that happened to me. So the other story I want to share is about a storyboard artist trying to break into the industry. He was going around to different studios, right? Again, talking to people and trying to get his foot in the door. And there's one particular studio where he kept showing up regularly, and while he was there, he kind of talked it up with the receptionist. So the two of them got to know each other a little bit, and there's this one time where he came in with his resume and portfolio and everything and hoping to get in, and the receptionist just told him, well, tell you what, you just sit down, right? Sit down and wait. Of course, in any studio, there's activity, people coming out and moving around and things, right? So he had been there a while, watching all this going on. And so he was about to stand up and leave and maybe come back another day. And the receptionist, no. You just sit there, hon. I know her. So I could see her saying something like that, right? You just sit there, hon. So he sat back down, and he might have been there, like I want to think like he was there for maybe like an hour or two, just sitting in the lobby, just waiting. So there's a point where, the boss kind of walked by and he stopped by the desk and he'd seen this guy just sitting there for a while, and so he kind of leads in and talks to the receptionist. Said, "Who is this guy? What does he want?" And so she looks up at him and she says, "He's been waiting to see you." And so, he just kind of said, okay. And he made some time. He saw him shortly after and he got hired. And so this guy, having so much trouble breaking in as a storyboard artist, eventually he and a friend of his broke off and started their own little company. And so they started doing storyboard contracts, and eventually they came up with ideas for shows, and I think they sold one of them. And with that money, they kind of reinvested it, and they started building up a studio, right? And so it started with two guys doing storyboards and then got into animation, and there came a time where that guy was my boss. I know it can be discouraging to go out and apply and try to make these contacts and, basically get ghosted and ignored. And I understand that the conditions for the two stories I shared were different than what's going on now. But I think the key thing to keep in mind is that persistence pays off. So at this point, I would ask two questions. One is, in the fog of uncertainty, how clear is your vision? And the other one is your goal important enough? Is your dream big enough to see past and see through the challenges and obstacles before you? Because that's what'll get you through it. So I want to say things are tough. I think we all know that, but hang in there. Can't rain forever. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. It's darkest before dawn. Pick your cliche saying. They all have some truth to them, right? And in the words of another wise, bearded Canadian, I hope someone out there gets this. Remember, I'm pulling for you. We're all in this together. Until next time, animate away. Oh, I'm a YouTuber now. What do you think? Too much? Blue light too much? Yeah. Comment below. Let me know.